truly, it's with all honor and without any further ado that I bring Brother Gary Wayne on. Hello, brother.
Hello, I had to do a little bit of
On the
fancy.
Remnant report tonight.
Pardon me?
I said it's truly an honor to have you on the Remnant report tonight.
Oh, terrific. So happy to be here, and so sorry for the delay. I had to do some routing and copying into Safari and a few other things to make the link.
No delay, we're just on time.
So yeah, excited to be here and excited about the topic, not necessarily from a Christian perspective as to a lot of the things that we're going to talk about, but what we're going to do is talk about things that Christians should know about.
And you would think, because I grew up evangelical, and I can remember I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church, and I can remember in my very, very early life, up to about age 6 or so, I can remember having, we'd have these, we never went trick-or-treating, my mom never allowed it, but we would go to the church on Halloween.
Yeah.
But I can remember up to age 6 having actually haunted houses at the church.
Yeah.
And it was really, it wasn't too much longer after that the people in the church, I guess, realized that, Halloween was an occult day. And it was because of that, I guess, that they stopped doing the haunted houses, but they still did what they call fall festivals.
Yeah.
And they're still celebrating it.
It shows you how much invasion and infiltration of the Gnostics and the polytheist religions have done over the centuries into the church that would become something common. And the whole dumbing down on the idea of what is being celebrated and made to be into something fun is, a whole nother level of sophistication in the power and the levers that it takes to be able to do that. But it has happened over a period of time, and it starts in about 700 or 800 AD when Pope Gregory moves All Saints' Day from May to November 1st, which is the day after All Hallows' Eve. And by 1000, the Roman makes it, official as All Souls' Day. And that's when you get that sort of, I think, convergence and acceptance of celebrating a completely occultic polytheist evening, which is longer than an evening, by the way, in terms of its whole celebration, sort of comes together, and it's been there ever since. And it seems only now that people are maybe starting to wake up a little bit to the fact that there's something's not right here, and it doesn't sound all that Christian. It is a lot of fun, no doubt about it. Who doesn't, as children didn't like to dress up in costumes, and who as a child wouldn't want to have candy and stuff like that, and parties and things like that. But it's part of a ritual, and that's the thing we need to keep in mind.
One thing I did want to ask you before, because you may be going to cover this, but just in case you weren't, I was asked this earlier and didn't know the answer to it. Is midnight tonight or midnight tomorrow night their most, I guess, what they believe is their most powerful time? Is it tonight at midnight or tomorrow night?
Yeah, so typically it wouldn't go dusk to dusk as it would within monotheism. And typically it does go by almost a calendar date, if we can look at it that way. And again, don't be surprised, and people aren't surprised, and many people already know that the calendar is a solar year, which is a sun worshiping thing, and all the names of the days of the week and the months have to do with occultism and gods and things like that. So we shouldn't be surprised that might sort of align with a calendar date. And it's All Hallows Eve is the night before the 1st, and that starts an 11-day festival of the harvest. And of course, if anybody's doing any counting, they know that Remembrance Day ends on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, which is, three prime numbers that add up to 33, which is the end of the feast of the harvest, or Samhain. So it begins the period. And the night of All Hallows Eve is the night where are open for the demons to come through, and are going to be having a night of havoc and doing sort of what they want. And again, people should not be surprised that this is a worldwide celebration, because it goes back to a common religion that was split into different sort of vernacular pantheons, but the same religion all around the world. So it makes sense that, for example, that in the Spanish and Central American in particular, you have a Dia de los Muertos, which begins on, October 31 and ends November 2nd. Doesn't go to the full length, but that's the evening of the dead, and people paint their faces this pale white, which is connected to all things occult, and connected to a lot of things in the Halloween ritual and festival.
Well, last year this time, I had probably the most special guest that I will ever have on my program. My mom came home, and I had her tell the story about when the coven and the leader of the coven of witches came after her and to try to kill her. And the story I shared with you when we were talking the other day, and that was really the first time in my life I realized that there was something wrong with Halloween. And I have, of course, very recently realized that it has always been a holiday, a festival that celebrates death. Whether it's Samhain, or the Day of the Dead, or Lemuria. All of those are celebrations of the dead in some form or another. But I think it was, I can't remember exactly how long ago it was, but the first person I ever hear give a detailed description of Halloween, and it all the way back to really Old Testament, the Nephilim, was when I heard you talk about Halloween. And I said, great, you were really talking more about, I think that in that program, the descendants of the giants, and tying in all these different festivals. But still, it seems like just about all of the occult goes back to the Nephilim or their descendants in some form or another.
It really does, and it helps to kind of understand that organizational structure of the rebellious angels and the offspring. So, I mean, you have, many levels of angels, different kinds of angels, and you have the demigods, who were the offspring of the angels or the gods and human females. And then those were the heroes, as they're known in Greek mythology and other names around the world. And those beings, their bodies died because God limits life to 120 years in Genesis 6:3, because of what the angels done. And that's no coincidence why that's in there. It's specifically to that violation against the laws of creation. And when the Nephilim's bodies died, their spirits didn't go to sleep like human spirits do. And they weren't permitted to heaven. And they were forced to roam the earth. And that's where a lot of the hero worship that if people understand Greek history and mythology, sort of came from, was these Nephilim spirits who were so they've lost their body, they would come back and they would haunt the local city that they used to live in, the city-state, and they would do rituals and festivals to ward them off. This is all kind of related to what's going on in Halloween, and these are also known as, vagabond goes in China in Taoism, and they would put things and talismans over their doors on certain days of the year to ward these spirits off that were the spirits of dead kings. And this is the same thing that is recorded in Greek mythology, with Persephone going to Hades at the beginning of November to be with the king Hades in Greek mythology, which would be into the underworld, where the abyss is also located, and where some of the Nephilim demon spirits are locked up, as in prisons on the sides of the abyss, as what Ezekiel 1 and 32 and Isaiah 14 talk about. So the terrible ones and the branches of the terrible ones of Isaiah 25 and some of the same verse that I just quoted. And so this is all part of that period, and it's a part of the period when those portals open. And so if we start to understand that these things called spirits are the demons, and these are what are coming through those portals on All Hallows Eve, and these are therefore the bodiless spirits of the Nephilim and the Rephaim, then things start to make terms of the characters that are involved in the costuming and some of the figures that would be more famous in Halloween. So yeah, it does, everything goes back to on All Hallows Eve for this almost celebration of Jack O'Green, or the reincarnation spirit of the occult, that is typically these human spirits that humans believe are part of the reincarnation process and involvement into godhood. It's just all the demon spirits that weren't permitted to go to sleep and who are not in the prisons. So I think that's the most important place to kind of start, as to starting to break down why that is very, very key to Halloween. So now if you look at a little bit of the history as we get it from Western history, you have All Hallows Eve as being a celebration that went on significantly in a big part of Celtic history. The Druids and the witches and the wizards, and of course the wizards and the witches are the priestesses and the priests of the religion. So when we talk about Druids, that's who they would be, and of course covens and witchcraft are very well connected to Celtism, and I'm not sure Jeremy went, but hopefully he's still there and he can at least hear what we're talking about. I've lost him as a picture on my screen, but he's back, terrific. And so what would happen on All Hallows Eve, the night when the portals would open in Wales and Ireland and Scotland and England, and similarly around the world, but specifically here where we get most of our traditions on it, is that the priests, priestesses, and people within the occult religion, the Wiccan religion, the Druidic religion, would go door to door, and particularly rich because they had servants, and they would knock on the door and they would demand a trick or a treat, or they would shout trick or treat. And so the treat is they provide a servant that was going to be used for sacrifice, and if they didn't, then they left a trick for them. Well, what that trick was, it was a blood-painted six-pointed star in a circle that would mark them for these evil spirits coming through the portals in All Hallows Eve to wreak havoc on them for not providing a sacrifice. And they would do this at night after it got dark, and they would take around these lanterns filled with fat in the night, which starts to lead into a bit of the jack-o'-lantern thing, but slightly different, but sort of the same sort of concept. And once they took, the servant had a choice. They could participate and try and grab an apple from boiling water, or sometimes boiling fat, but usually water, with their hands tied behind their back. And if they could grab it with their teeth, they would be free, but they probably would be maimed for life because that water would be boiling. And if they failed, they would be beheaded and burned for fats for these lanterns that they would be carrying around and setting out all night to ward off some of these demon spirits. And if they refuse to take the challenge, and this connects in another ritual of occultism that most people don't really understand but is completely connected, they would be taken to the Wicker Man and they would be burned to death in case of the gods. So they would be anyway. So it's just a matter of how the servants would be sacrificed. So just as we understand all of that coming together, they're pacifying these demon spirits. They're doing what the original people did when the Nephilim died, when we talked about the hero worship in ancient Greek, or the vagabond ghost demons in Taoism. And this again would happen all around the world, that they're trying to pacify the spirits that no longer have a body and are, thirsting for a body to possess and interact with the world.
The main thing that I see in hearing all of that and looking at the festival of all that Halloween is really based on, or that it is. I mean, it was changed, of course, by the conflicts, but what I see is that this festival is really centered and celebrated by the world. And even the worship of old that you were talking about, that was a very worldly practice. And most times the things of this world are pagan, and we are told not to be like the world. And for that reason, if no other, it really should not be something that is celebrated by the Christian.
Yeah, and carving jack-o'-lanterns as well. It's all part of this same festival, and so people may not be fully aware of the connections and who and how the jack-o'-lantern comes about. But there was a Tuatha De Danann fairy giant that the story is based on, as it goes back into Irish mythology. And there's a couple of encounters that Nephilim has with the devil, the myth goes, and what he does is he tricks the devil. And so I don't think this is completely based on reality, because there's a lot of allegory in here, but once you hear the word trickster, that is another level and part of the organizational structure of the kinds of angels and the kinds of demon spirits. So you have trickster demons and trickster gods that I'll probably come back to in a little while. But so understand the allegory that's going on. And so at the end of the two times he tricks Satan into not harming him, or if he were to die, that he wouldn't take his spirit to the lake of fire, or to Hades, or to hell, whichever one that's referring to there. He makes a deal with the devil that, again, he's not going to do that sort of longer term. But outside of the deal, outside of the 10 years, eventually Jack dies. And his name is Jack, where the name, Jack of the Lantern comes from. And I'll touch more on the word Jack in a few minutes. But what is happened to him is that God will not permit his spirit to go to heaven, to this myth, and then the devil won't let his spirit go into Hades. And so he's forced to wander, and he's provided a turnip. So the first jack-o'-lanterns were gourds and turnips. And the reason why we have pumpkins is because they're more commonly and easily grown in North America. They actually are a better sort of vegetable to work with, and you get some larger ones and rounder ones and things like that. And so he was put a candle or a light or oil within the turnip that was hollowed out, and then put a slit in it and guide his way as he wandered the earth forever. Well, of course, that's a pretty much an identical story to what the Book of Enoch talks about in terms of God not letting the spirits of the Nephilim into heaven, and they're not permitted to go to sleep, right? So this is enough story about a demon spirit who dies afterwards, and his name is Jack. And Jack in the occult world means a spirit. So this is definitely a reference about a spirit or a demon being, and without coincidence and by design, I think, is named Jack. So when you think about Jack in the Box, and you get this sort of crazy sort of clown that's coming out of the Jack in the Box, understand those two terms are related as well. And the clown is deeply connected to and intimately connected to the trickster spirits, both angelic and demonic. And of course, that sort of comes out in terms of how their faces are. But we'll probably come back to that in a couple of minutes. But when you see anything that says Jack, and this is now Jack of the Lantern, this is about demon spirits. So when you have Jack Sparrow, the movies about the pirates, and I'm trying to think of the names of the movies off the top of my head, the Pirates of the Caribbean with Johnny Depp. Yeah, he's Jack Sparrow, and the original person that was the pirate in this movie was named Jack Ward, but they used Sparrow because that's supposedly Jack Ward's nickname. If you've seen any of the movies, he's basically this demon between the underworld and the world of the living. So he's named with a purpose. And also the idea that pirates are connected in here as well. And pirates are one of those significant costumes that people tend to choose for Halloween. Well, that's because that's later an allegory of the Knights Templar, and the pirate ships are the Knights Templar ships, and they flew the Skull and Bones cross or flag, and that was a representation of an ossuary, and an ossuary is what they used to put the bones of people in the Middle East, and particularly the land of when they died. And when they put the bones in there, they had to have the leg bones and the arm bones, and they used to put them in kind of a cross, and the head would be at the top. And that's the emblem, that is the flag flown on the Templar fleet that disappeared after 1807, when the Templars were taken down by the French and the Catholic Church, and nobody ever found them. They were basically centered in mostly Portugal, which is the port of the Grail, and sailed around the world and did their business, but they were also robbing from Spain and England and other ships on the fleet. And so there's a connection here with the secret societies, with that allegory that is overlaid, and it has a special meaning to them. For them, they didn't believe, because these were the adepts of the Templars as opposed to the lower level knights, in their Gnostic religion, they didn't believe that Jesus was the Redeemer or the Word of God, or that he died on the cross, that he actually survived and produced offspring, which is, recorded in their fairy tale Da Vinci Code, that has a lot of their belief systems in there. The important thing is they believed they were the keepers of the message, and the keepers of the minutes. It was a sign, allegory of who they were and what they believed in as the rogue Knights Templar. Jack Sparrow is named after for this particular set of movies, which I find absolutely fascinating, because pirates used is one of the sort of favorite costumes for Halloween. And if you look at all of the, well, not all, but let's say most of the costumes, they all have a connection to All Hallows Eve and demons and giants and evil spirits. So, I mean, ghosts, people like to dress in ghosts. Well, that's the Jack spirit, that's the Nephilim spirit. And vampires is another big one. And vampire, is based on modern mythology of Dracula, with Dracula being the son of a dragon, as you take Dracul, and A being the son, and that's based on Vlad the Impaler, who was a Tuatha De Danann of the red hair, hazel-eyed, pale-skinned variety, educated at the University of Solomon in Vienna, and he had a particular sensitivity to light, and was kind of one of these night operators, which is vampires based on, with the Upiers and the night operators, which is connected on a whole rabbit trail of meanings and connections that I won't spend too much time on that. But understand, this is the patriarchal bloodline of the dragon, line of the Nephilim and the Rephaim. as opposed to the Tuatha De Danann and the fairy people, which are the matriarchal bloodline. And of course, fairies are a significant part, and the different kinds of fairies are what people dress up in, as with vampires and different kinds of vampires. So whether or not it goes back to Lilith as a vampire, or it goes back to Lilith as a fairy queen, fairy tales and fairy characters are a huge part of Halloween, and people like to dress up as goblin, elves, and trolls, and gnomes, and all good-looking ones, and like the good-looking elves in Tolkien, or you also have the mischievous ones like the leprechauns, and all these different kinds people will dress up in. And you have these fairy queens and fairy princesses. Those are, again, that's all part of matriarchal bloodline, just as Pendragon would be the offsetting king, the head dragon, or the dragon king. King Arthur and Guinevere would be a classic example. So people dressing up as fairy tale characters, all they're doing is dressing up as characters that are used to keep alive genealogies of the Rephaim and the Nephilim, and the history and their belief systems that are set up. And we already talked about witches and wizards are the priests and the priestesses. And of course, warlocks would be another name for a wizard. And you also have all of these types of monsters like Frankenstein. That's the new man concept. That's DNA manipulation. That's the chimera thing. It's all part of the occult history. You have werewolves, which are shapeshifters, just as some people think that the offspring of the fallen angels have shapeshifting capabilities like the parents do. I don't know whether they do or not, but that's part of that sort of belief. Werewolves were part of the shapeshifters and have shapeshifter capabilities, and again are a family of hero titan kings in Greek mythology that are turned into werewolves or dogmen type people, kind of a parallel story to the dog Nephilim that's out there. And they're turned into these werewolves and shapeshifters for getting on the wrong side of Zeus. And so this again is another Nephilim kind of story. You have zombies. Zombies is very, very popular these days, particularly in movies and things. And again, this is about the undead, right? These are just as the vampires are called the undead. So understand, it's not about creatures that don't have a spirit or a soul in it, walking around with a physical body. It's about the undead as we would understand it from the vampire mythos, where they have this ability to come back after death and to be the enemy of humankind. So this is kind of like what's going to happen in the end time, with sort of how that allegory sort of continues. So zombies are part of it, and it's all done through black magic and knowledge and stuff like that. And then of course you have the pirates that we had talked about. You pretty much name the type of costume that people will wear, and it celebrates some aspect of the occult and their history, their belief system, and how it all comes together for this 11 and a half day celebration of Samhain that happens beginning on All Hallows Eve on October 31st.
Now, is that's the same thing as the Samhain? It's just not spelled the way it sounds, or
I'm sorry, I missed that. That's the same as what?
the Samhain or whatever you said. That's the way it's.
Samhain, yeah. It's pronounced differently by many people. So I think it's Samhain. Sometimes it's one word, sometimes it's San. So depending on which variation that you're getting of it, yeah, same, but the same word.
And is there any connection to? Because I know that, like you said, that's an ancient Celtic festival. Is there any relation to that festival and the Roman festival of Lemuria?
Yeah, the Romans had several festivals of the dead, and it typically would have taken place in February. And then that, I think, again, along with Roman Christianity, as they were conflating or converging the various polytheist celebration dates into Christianity because, I mean, let's face it, that religion became more of control over the empire, and it was sort of designed to do and control over the people, and they would want to bring in sort of a new cosmology of a religion. So yeah, I think all of that conflated into the same dates, just as, you know, All Saints Day went from May to October, and so the celebration of the Roman dead went from February to October as well, if we're talking about the same one.
Okay, that really when people, I've had somebody ask me what's the big deal about separation of church and state, and said,
there you go.
Constantine is making church and state one is a perfect example. That's really what how paganism got so entrenched into Christianity, or at
Yeah.
least had a lot to do with it.
Yep. Absolutely.
I think so. I've always thought that, which that's one thing I've never, even before I really woke up to a lot of the different truths surrounding the holidays and paganism. I pretty much knew that there was a big difference in the Roman Catholic Church and what the Bible says. I'm not going to say that there is a difference between the Protestant Church and the Roman Catholic Church. But even with differences, there is still a lot of problems in Protestantism, and especially when we talked about how this is still celebrated and believed to be a Christian celebration by a lot of people. They just do not know the truth, which is one of the main reasons I wanted to do this program. I did 2 programs recently, even though it's only October, on the pagan origins of the Christ Mass or Christmas, and there you can really trace at least the where they were brought in as a Christian holiday. All of these holidays can be traced back to Rome and to where they were brought into the church. You've got like we were talking about All Hallows Day, All Hallows Eve. It was, just the same as All Saints Day, and
Yep.
you've got St. Patrick's Day, you've got Valentine's Day. All of these things are believed to be Christian holidays. Easter, Christmas, these all have pagan origins.
Yeah, and they'll have some connections to the Bible in terms of what they're overlaying onto that core polytheist celebration. But we as Christians need to be aware of that, and how we're celebrating those types of days should be rooted in a Christian perspective, a theist perspective. So yeah, it's really quite clear that Easter is Ishtar and Isis and the Mother Queen, and the eggs are fertility eggs, and it's part of the May festival and the spring festivals of occultism and worshiping a fertility goddess. So, and they've conflated that with the crucifixion. So, I prefer to say Resurrection Day than Easter. And unfortunately, Easter shows up in the King James Bible in Acts 12:4, which should say Passover as opposed to Easter. It's a clear mistranslation, but that's done by design. They're markers. Fine, I understand that, but we need to be aware of those types of things. And again, there's no issue with celebrating Christ's birth, but understand that it's overlaid onto the winter solstice festival and has birth dates that coordinate in there that are basically birth of some of their pagan gods. So as opposed to Jesus, and we know Jesus was probably born in September or October, just the details where the sheep are not in the stables. They're actually in the field. And if it was December, they'd be in the stables because that's the rainy season. So that was probably not in December. And again, we need to filter details and say, no, we don't part. We need to focus on this part. And I think what we need to do a better job of communicating, and so that people can make better decisions that way.
I know for me, in my Christian walk, the things that's made it easier for me to decide about pretty much everything is I try to revolve my life around Christianity, because Christ is the center of our life. And I try to revolve my Christianity around Christ as well. In other words, the simplicity of Christ. I try to do only pretty much what Christ commanded. And if it's something that's in the gospel, in the writings of Paul or the other epistles, then in order to find out what it means, I try to take it back to what Jesus said and
Yep.
in the gospel. And so as far as like the celebrations that most people celebrate all year, the ones that we've recently named and the other ones, but if I can't find it in scripture, then I try not to do it. And I would definitely agree with you that there's nothing wrong with celebrating Christ's birth. I don't know if I think it's okay to do it on pagan feast day, which the winter solstice always has been. But again, I know we are to work out our own salvation through fear and trembling. Just for me, like I said, I just try to take it back to the simplicity of Christ.
Yep. Yeah, always the best case. And again, we need to have a better grasp of the influence of the occult history and how they overlay that, particularly as they address it with children in terms of the entertainment, whether or not it's the Narnia tales or Lord of the Rings or fairy tales or whatever, because it all is reflecting their belief system. And
Well,
warn that Halloween is the clown. And you also have clowns that are part of the circus. And then you have clowns that are part of children's parties all of the time. Well, the clowns come from the crazy clown trickster spending in occultism. And typically that person is going to receive knowledge. And there's several different levels of this. So you have trickster spirits. One are angels that would do more of an avatar effect, just as Satan would have entered into Judas to help him get over the hump of betraying Jesus. Just as you get that avatar effect with Vishnu entering in Buddha, for example, and had, I think 16 different avatars, if I remember, avatars that he manipulated. If I recall, and Shiva, the destroyer god, was also known for doing the same thing. So there's one of those, and that's important to understand. It's part of the New Age Christ consciousness concept, where those individuals are an avatar, an angel that's providing power and wisdom, and is part of the Antichrist belief system, or they would not call him the Antichrist, but the Messiah, the dragon Messiah that they want to bring on, is going to have that as part of his power and strength. And just as Antichrist receives this power, that's the effect that I'm talking about. And so there's also the demon spirit is not a symbiotic relationship. You have a demon spirit that is possessing a human that is suppressing host. And there may or may not be some knowledge that goes along with it, but it turns into these horrific looking people who have this attack going on. And and I'm going to come back to that in a second. Of course, then you also have trickster spirits like the little people, like the leprechauns, or the mischievous ones. And so this runs through with a whole series through the hierarchy of these trickster spirits, just as werewolves are part of that trickster spirit aspect, and wendigos, back of the lantern, which was a Nephilim demon spirit, was, is allegorized as being a trickster spirit as well. So when we see demons that are destroying bodies, it usually gives very, very pale sort of look to them. And then with the clowns, you have that pale undercoating of their makeup, just as mimes are part of that the same type of trickster spirit, but they're not being deformed. So that would be allegorizing from an angel, which would be more of a symbiotic relationship and providing additional knowledge. So yeah, the occult has to be careful, at least in my mind, they should be careful as to who they're inviting in, because a witch, but either way, you're not really going to be in control. So I really recommend it. And so as I look at that, then I look at shamans who also wore these white faces, right? And they are shown all around the world. And that's the same sort of look that happens in, Dia de los Muertos as well, in the Day of the Dead celebrations. And that they're receiving some of that additional knowledge, but it's just that blank white face. But in the clown, you get these demon distorted looks, right? Big red noses, they have colors on their faces and things like that. That is, I think, depicting more of that relationship between a demon spirit that is inviting them, and it's not as symbiotic. So classifications of that, but they're related. One is just telling a little bit more detail. And you also get these masks that are made up in China for the theater that have all of these demon faces on there as well. And that with background, and that's reflecting the same thing, as well as that there's something underneath the mask, and that's the host, right? Just as the clown is indicating that with that same type of look, and just as the blank white face is saying there is something underneath that is the angelic spirit, the fallen angelic spirit. And so bring that into Western civilizations, and it used to be that all the actors wore masks. That would be to disguise and hide what is really underneath, that there's something different that's being shown than what is really underneath. And that's the whole ideology and the ritual of wearing costumes on Halloween.
You can connect the dots with so many things in culture. It's crazy. Really can. The dots can be connected in so many different areas.
Well, and then if you look at court jesters, which are part of the clown mythos as well, and some jokers, not as in modern times as before, but they were always in the royal court. And these were the priests that were amongst the court, and they had to make and always please the king, otherwise they would get their faces slit open with knives. And so now if you look at the Joker in Batman, you know where that comes from. It's part of that gesture court understanding of these alchemists that were before the court that went awry with either predictions or in helping the king. And of course, Batman is part of that superhero thing, and superheroes are always part of Halloween as well. So Batman is based on Camazotz, which is of the house of the bat, of the Xibalba of the Quiché Maya, which were the demigods and the vampire type people of the Quiché Maya. The bat people were a separate sort of branch of that, and that would sort of go back to that bird-like Tengu Nephilim of Southeast Asia that would probably come from those Anunnaki type of angels that are shown in Sumeria. And so this court gesture, I just sort of went on a bit of a tangent, but I understand most superheroes are all based on Nephilim as well, because they're super powerful and strong and had these super strong spirits and stuff like that. So with the court, these were based on the same understanding, but they had extra knowledge. So they tended not to have all the different colors and things and the distortions. They just had sort of white face that was part of being part of the organizational structure, the ruling king and the queen and representative, and hidden as a gesture for that occult religion being provided to descendants of Nephilim and Rephaim as the king and the queen, because they take all of their bloodlines back of the Nephilim, and thus hidden from the Rome Church.
I tell you what, I probably forgotten more than you had said tonight. But it's crazy how many different areas this one really is just a holiday that's been commercialized. This commercial holiday here in the Western world has really just, you can go off on all these different directions.
Yeah.
What about and I know that this really, I thought about it when we were talking about Christmas a few minutes ago. I was thinking about the real connection that I see with Christmas and Odin, or Santa Claus and Odin. But I wanted to ask you, is with like Halloween, is there any Norse history with it at all?
With Christmas?
No, with Halloween. I know there is.
Yeah. So when you look at Norse history in terms of the fairy mythology, they've got elves and they've got demons and they've got Loki as a trickster spirit, and Loki is the the individual that Luke Skywalker is based on. Loki Skywalker, as he's called, and he's a Nephilim character. And so if you look at Lord of the Rings, I guess is probably the best way to make that comparison. Is what Tolkien did was he overlaid Norse fairy mythology onto the fairy story and the antediluvian history. So when you see those characters, those are more Norse versions. They're very much connected to the English and the Celtic versions, but a different branch of the Tuatha De Danann version. So, but very, very similar. But those are more specifically used the Norse mythology, but that's because his bloodlines go back to Odin. So why wouldn't he use the Norse one? So it all sort of makes sense. So yeah, there is a very, very rich history of trolls and elves and things like that in the Tuatha De Danann. And anything that you see in Celtic fairy mythology would be part of the Tuatha De Danann of the Norse, because you have, as you take their history back, this is their history as they would understand it, is that the Tuatha De Danann, which is the tribe of Anu, show up in Scythia, and they're the people that the offspring of Japheth are going to intermarry with after the flood. In their belief system is that these Tuatha De Danann escape from Tartarus, or the abyss, and through Scythia, and from there they're going to migrate into the Covenant land to intermarry, start giant lair. You're going to have ones that go up the Danube River and into Germany and into Norway and Sweden, and other ones are going to branch out a little bit further south into Russia. And these are the blonde-haired, blue-eyed Tuatha De Danann, and the red-haired, hazel-eyed ones tended to go over to England and Scotland, but they're also in that whole area because, as I mentioned earlier, Vlad the Impaler took his genealogies back to these Tuatha De Danann from Scythia, and he had red hair and hazel eyes, right? So again, all of this is interconnected. And just so people haven't heard me say this on some of the shows, these genealogies are kept. And what's interesting is Prince Charles he's on record, and you can Google it and get the link. He says he has the genealogies that take him back to Vlad the Impaler, who Dracula was based on. So all of this is out there if you dig a little bit below the surface to start to connect some of those dots.
Yeah, I tell you what, there are plenty of dots, but like with the whole vampire thing, that like you said, you can really, any costume that you could pick for, and that's the commercialization of it, is how, if you really look, all these costumes can be traced back to one of these things. And
sure. Well, let's just continue a little bit on. you're coming in and out. So let's sort of develop that vampire mythos a little bit more so people can get a good understanding. As I said, Dracula based on the word dragon and son of a dragon. And that roots back into Greek and Latin, and in the version, it roots back to being defined as a watcher. And of course, a dragon had wings and flew, and seraphim angels had a fiery body plus serpent face and 6 wings. And these are the watchers. And these are parents of the bloodline for Dracula. And of course, Nephilim, after they lost their immortality we talked about earlier in the show in Genesis 6, they began to drink blood so that they could live longer and develop their cognitive abilities. So the belief goes. And so this is what the undead, which as we talked about earlier, again, is basically talking about these demon spirits who are in a physical form, who are drinking blood to keep this physical form immortal. And Nephilim drank blood. This is a complete allegory about Nephilim and demons, and in understanding what is really being told. You need to be adept because they encode all of the big information underneath the superficial story. And they have the teeth of a cobra, and a cobra is part of the headdresses and things of pharaohs. In fact, even has the hood of the cobra as part of the headdress. And equivalent to the Nagas over in, and again, these would be gods who had offspring that produced priests in ruling class and class giants by mating with human females. And go take that word Naga back to snake. It actually goes back to the Sanskrit word for cobra. And so there's a significant meaning and importance to the cobra snake level, and I think as it goes back to like Nagas and the cobra like seraphim angels. And of course the vampires are the enemy and the enemy of humans in particular because they're hunting humans, right? Just as the Nephilim did. I mean, the amount of allegory stuff that they overlay into the stories is absolutely mind-boggling.
And you cover so much of this stuff is really entrenched and enlaced in your book, the Genesis 6 conspiracy. And we really looking at the secret societies, all of the, and the Nephilim, all of the gods in each of the different degrees can most certainly be traced back to the Nephilim. A lot of times they actually are Nephilim, or at least watchers. But I would have to say that your book has got so much very, very awesome information in it.
Well, and what it will do,
I would really promote for everybody to read.
Yeah, and what it will do is provide you a base level to start understanding how they communicate and hide things in plain sight with their allegories and language, and you won't watch anything after reading the book in the same way that you viewed things in the past. And I'll give a couple more examples here, and this part's not in the book, but it certainly relates to what we're talking about tonight. I talked about the word Jack as meaning a spirit, and it was like an type for a demon spirit, and is embedded throughout fairy tale, the name Jack. And it's part, as I mentioned, it's part of that trickster spirit of demigods who are cunning and they're very quick and adept, just as the Nephilim were, because they were the ultimate warriors. They just weren't these huge, clumsy, geek-looking things. These were built for war. And there's a similar term when we connect of the Jack or the spirit. You've got Jack Green, and what Jack is the light aspect of the god Cernunnos, or the Green Man, people may know that as. And Cernunnos is a satyr-like god of the Celtic pantheon. And it's the same satyr green nature god that Cern is of the Etruscan pantheon. And it's the same type of god as Bacchus of the Roman pantheon. And it's the same god as the Pan god of the Greek pantheon, and the temple of Pan that's located at Mount Hermon. And it's the same god or group of gods, which I think are degraded from angels and watchers who maybe didn't go to the abyss, because you get satyrs showing up in the Bible, which are the same being that we're talking about, satyr gods, in Isaiah 13 and 34 to be specific. But this is what Azazel was degraded to, was a goat god, right? And he's typically in that circle of blood with the star and his image in there. And when we understand that Jack of the Green is connected to that in sort of that spirit, we talked about avatar and knowledge passing on and power and things like that. And then also knowing that you have a demonic one, which isn't as symbiotic as that, is Jack of the Green is also the Oak King and the Holly King. And the Oak King, the oak is the holy or sacred tree of the Druids, and it's part of the world tree. And oak is also one of those trees that's listed on Bashan for its strength, right? It says cedars on were for their height and were for their building materials. And holly is the wood, holly wood, that they would make the wands out of for the priests and the priestesses and the witches and the warlocks. And it's the same thing that Hollywood is named after, that records all of these fairy tales and occult history and belief system and science fiction and all the different genres that they have. And this Jack is the Oak King, who's the leader of the hunt of Samhain, or Samhain, depending on how you want to pronounce that. And that happened during that 11-day period. And this is also the same Jack archetype that goes into, as I said, Jack in the Box with the clown jumping, or Jack Frost, where the snowman comes to life, and Jack of Legs, or all the different other aspects. And it's also allegorized as the Green Man throughout some of the literature in occult history, where you've got like Gawain of King Arthur, which is a fairy tale and grail super fairy tale of several different ideologies that are being documented in the Grail tales. He is the Green Knight, right? And that is all in there for purpose. And just as Robin of the Hood, which is an allegory for being in exile, and Maid Marian, which is Jesus and Mary in their belief system, being in exile and going against the evil kingdom that's run by Christianity at that time. So again, you get that green overlay, and the Green May festivals are all part of that ritual that we're talking about with the Green Man. And of course, Peter Pan in the elf story is also representative of those gods as the Pan god dressed in green and that nature god, but only from a little person perspective and in the trickster spirit again. Like, the allegories are absolutely extraordinary. Guess what? Captain Hook is a pirate that shows up in that story.
There are just more. I know I've said this so many times, but no matter how many times I hear this information, it's just mind blowing to me how people can't. And I'm sure that there are people that see the evil, but just not without making the connections to things like even the wand of Hollywood.
It's been set down for centuries, and people have been brainwashed and not to look at these stories and things in any sort of evil way, but just great entertainment and fun for the kids and stuff like that. But it's not. It's all preparing them for deception so that they're more easily led astray, and dominating that whole area with their stories, with their history, their beliefs, and then pushing the monotheist Christian stories, history and belief system aside. So by doing so, you can get mass following of rituals, and people don't even know that they're doing it, and that's what they would call participating at the lower levels and not understanding what they're participating in. So as you climb up that ladder of knowledge, you know, 33 degrees in the Scots Rite, the third 3 degrees of the York Rite, which is the old system, and that's just being split into 11 different levels of the 3 degrees. People below the 3rd degree or the 33rd degree are not taught the real meanings to the allegories or the rituals. They're kept from that. And so the adepts look at the people below adept level as being like all the other people they're brainwashing, because they're too mundane, they're not worthy to know the truth. So we'll give them pablum to believe in, a superficial fairy story on the surface that's very entertaining, but they'll have no idea what it really is.
And it's not until they get to, like you said, the upper degrees, and then finally the honorary degree 33, that they're really brought into or told and shown that this is about Lucifer, that it's Luciferian.
It is, and even that is very low level in the whole idea. I know if you're going to, in as being a Mason, as in Freemasonry, if you're going to be several lodges, you need to be the 5th degree. So after you get to the 33rd degree, you're going to be into the old system, because the Scottish system is, sort of a newcomer in the last couple of 100 years. So above that goes back to the Royalsons and their hierarchy. And I don't know how many degrees there are above that. I think there's 7 that I'm aware of. Some people 9. Some people have told me 12 or 13 degrees. I don't know. But only the purebloods, only the ones brought up in the Royal Masonic orders as being part of the elite royal bloodlines, are initiated from childhood, actually become an adept before adulthood, and they're at an age somewhere close to 30 before they can accept the adepthood title. They are taught in degrees, way beyond what a 33 Mason or 3rd degree York Rite Freemason would be, unless they're of the bloodlines. So, like King James of England, the first, who was the sponsor for the Bible. He's shown in, I think, the Lodge of Scone, as I recall, having a honorary initiation. Well, there's no, first of all, the English Freemasons don't show their documents as to who was members, but this is shown in colored glass and a whole bunch of things in many different places, including lodges. But he wasn't entering into Freemasonry then. He was just showing respect to it and accepting membership. He wasn't starting off at the lowest level. He was already a super adept from being a Royal Mason and initiated from child, as what have been Lewis and Tolkien, because they are at Oxford taken into the Rosicrucian Golden Dawn sponsored society, the Inklings, to develop their craft, and they have huge occult knowledge. So they're either downloaded from the Mason or they already knew it, and they're just developing their writing craft, similar to what Francis Bacon's writing societies of the Spear Shaker Society and the Knights of the the Shakespeare plays come from. This is a long tradition of them flooding the marketplace with their history and their writing and their teachings. And again, people will say, well, there's no record of Tolkien as being a Freemason. Well, they didn't need to be. They have bloodlines that are pure. And again, in the series that I have for Tolkien and Lewis, part 5 and 6, I cover their bloodlines off, so that you'll understand that that's how they were allowed into the Rosicrucian Society, because they were already adepts from childhood. They just weren't old enough to accept that adept title. And so that's why Lord of the Rings and the Narnia tales and everything else that they wrote is absolutely loaded with occult symbols from, elves and satyrs and dragons and you name it. of them, right? Because they're there to put out literature that's going to entertain people and brainwash people, and particularly get the children hooked from an early age into thinking these characters and these stories are great. And they're for sometimes a whole life. They never really go beyond what he's really talking about in the book. So you get like Tolkien, for example, and this relates to some of the things that we were talking about earlier, is that creates this Christ consciousness character named Aslan, who's a lion, and he's an incarnation, right? People, how odd that is. We heard earlier about these avatars and the trickster spirit, and angels avataring and using an avatara to have the symbiotic relationship. Shiva, who I think is equivalent to Apollyon and Abaddon as the destroyer god, which would be, I think, Azazel. And I have a great document for people who are all make that connection biblically, connecting Azazel to Abaddon, Apollyon, and the son of perdition, as how that flows through. Shiva was the avatar for an avatar named Narasimha in the Hindu pantheon. And this Hindu pantheon with Narasimha was in the form of a lion, who Aslan is based on. I also talked a little earlier about this is going to be part of that Christ consciousness aspect of the Antichrist as a Christ consciousness figure or being avatared. In the Narnia tales, we get a figure out of Eastern religion that is an avatar of Shiva, who is going to be released, Azazel, Abaddon, Apollyon, in the end, just when Antichrist is rising to power. So he may be also being an avatar for Antichrist as well as Satan. And it's depicted as an incarnation. And these avatars are depicted in the Eastern Hindu religion as incarnate, as Christ consciousness aspect of their coming Messiah for the new age is a incarnation. The language could be more consistent, and the way they've done it is so diabolical to brainwash people, it will make it easier for a lot of people to accept the delusions that are coming.
And I've been in arguments with people before, sometimes about several different writers and Hollywood things that have been made into Hollywood movies, but especially the C.S. Lewis Aslan character. People have said, that the Narnia movies were Christian and C.S. Lewis was Christian. And are you serious? They've got the main character Aslan that is sacrificed on a pagan altar. It doesn't matter. The argument was, well, Aslan was portraying Christ, and that was Christ's crucifixion and resurrection.
Yeah. So who else was sacrificed on an altar that he based that on? He's conflating a few different archetypes in there, but the same sort of idea. They have what they call in their belief system those who are sent to us to help humanity way to godhood. Not the way that Jesus, but they use the same term, the way. And these are people like Confucius, or people like Buddha, or people like Hermes, and they have a whole list that they would devalue Jesus to that level of mortal prophet who had the divine avatar effect to give him the knowledge. But in this case, they're referring to a fellow by the name of Zoroaster, who was killed on an altar very early on in the post-Diluvian world, who is one of those sent on their way in their belief system, one of many of those people. And Zoroastrianism is an ancient religion that arrives very shortly after the flood, that the Sumerian religion was based on in Mesopotamia, and is the same religion that was exported to India by the Aryans, who again are the Tuatha De Danann in their belief system. None of that is coincidental.
A lot of people don't, when you say Aryans, I'm sure there are going to be a lot of people that don't realize who you're talking about. They're going to see Nazis.
Well, and that's where that belief system comes out of. right? They're a left-wing movement. Most people don't think they're left-wing, but National Socialism is left-wing. They're just left-wing fascists. And they based their whole belief system on KK did of the new man and the Aryans who are this Tuatha De Danann. In this case, it's the blonde-haired, blue-eyed one talked about, right? And that they believe they are superior, not because of their white skin, but their genes that go back to the giants. And that's the world that they're trying to create. Now, at the lower levels, they'll of those organizations, they'll just teach them whatever they need to do to lead them blindly to do the things that they need to do. But Hitler believed, where these Aryan nation people, Nazis, say they're taking their belief system was, he set up the Reichschurch, which was a polytheist religion that they called Ariosophy because it was the Aryan version of theosophy, which was of Gnosticism, designed to be the religion for the end time that acts in harmony with science. And so they morphed it into Ariosophy with their Aryan belief system and their blonde-haired, blue-eyed new man theology, which is trying to bring back the Nephilim as that superior being. And they believe that they're the superior beings because they believe they're the offspring and descendants of the giants who were born of the fallen angels, and that humans are just mundane. So they're more than anti, colored people. They're anti anything that isn't part of their belief system. So yeah, they're connected, but not in the way that people are brainwashed to believe them be connected. So when you have them and the Antifa groups or any of these other left-wing groups going at it, this isn't left against left, just different hate system.
Yeah, and when I see when I hear Aryan, the first thing I think about is the elves, the Tolkien elves, and also just that blonde hair, blue eye, and they may not even. I know that the belief system is the new man, but they may not have to wait on the return of the Nephilim as far as being regenerated. If you look back to just in the 1900s, Admiral Byrd described seeing these Aryan type beings up in Antarctica.
Yeah, exactly. And and again, I mean, they're described, right? So there's lots of ways where they can be part of the end time. It could be their descendants. It could be, as we get closer to the end time, the angels that aren't in the abyss that rebelled are going to create new ones, and maybe they already have. You certainly will be getting angels who were impassioned released towards the midpoint of the last 7 years when Revelation 9 opens up. So you're going to get that back. You may have cloned bodies taken over by demonic spirits so that they can interact in the physical world again. That would be, why not? If you can DNA a human body, why not make it bigger, right? Or you just may have ones that have survived either through being saved by fallen angels, put in stasis, in the earth, outside the earth, somehow, some way survived, that are going to show up. And then, of course, we have the descendants. So we have lots of ways for them to impact it so that it's like the days of Noah, as Jesus talks about in his warnings for the end time. But somehow, some way, we're going to feel an impact of them. And at least 3 demon spirits, right? And of course, we get told demon spirits participating in the end time, but we also get that war that is in Revelation 9 after the abyss is open, which has all of these crazy types of beings, right, that are described. And they're very, very similar to the Joel 1 and 2 because it's the same war. And I think that's the Gog War of Ezekiel 38 and 39 too. And again, we know that is the last days because it says it happens in the last days in Ezekiel 38. And so I think, and Joel 4 goes on to the Armageddon War. So I think that's the counterfeit Armageddon in my view and understanding of the end time. But where I'm going with it is these crazy beings that are being participating in the war. And I think that's comes out of the abyss. And I think that's partly due to advanced knowledge and technology that is being developed to create super weapons and weapons that Nephilim might rise on, that they have the bodies of in some of the descriptions, just as the unicorn was in the mythology, the horse that Nephilim rode into battle. And it had a horn on it that could tear apart a elephant's stomach and elephant with one poke. It was that powerful. And it would have to be large enough to be, to hold a giant. And it also had cloven feet, like goat's feet on it. And I think it might have even had in some of the descriptions a lion's tail. So it's very much a chimera animal that the Nephilim would have written. And when we start to look at that and match that up with what I'm talking about in creating weapons of war for to be able to fight against the angels and within the wars that are happening on the earth, I think it's going to be a significant part of it. So I look at that. Oh, and just one other thing when I'm talking about the unicorn and in their mythos, and everybody knows this, is that they disappear on the ark, right? For some reason, there's these innocent little animals. They're not these monsters, but the reason why they're not on the ark is because if they were real, they probably were in the age of Nephilim before the flood, is that they were a chimera type of animal and it was a violation against the laws of creation. So when you get the account of the flood where the animals are called to the ark and you get these words that are inserted after Noah, as God commanded him, God didn't command Noah to command animals. Those words are inserted. There's the him and the he, that is the reference, are inserted for a little bit of misdirection. God is the one who commanded the animals to come to the ark. He knew the ones that weren't corrupted because the whole earth was corrupt, right? And corrupt is that Hebrew word shakath, which means decay, spoil, destroy, violence, a whole bunch of different meanings. And God was seeing the world anew with a genetic bloodline of the 8 that was accounted for with the genealogies in the Bible. He wanted representative kinds of the species that were going to be on the ark for the unclean animals and the predators, and 7 unclean and 7 pairs of the clean animals, vegetarians, that would survive the flood, and ones that weren't corrupted with their DNA. And I think most of the animals at the time of the flood were corrupted by DNA because the whole earth corrupted, and same with the plants. And we're just getting to that level of technology today. Why? Because one of the overarching signs to the last generation that Jesus gives us, along with the fig tree generation, and that follows immediately the fig tree generation in Matthew 24 and Mark 13, is it will be like the days of Noah. So it's more than just the violence, it's all of that corruption. But again, that starts to answer why they keep this fairy tale imagery of the unicorn alive, why they have a story where this innocent little animal does the ark. It answers why that unicorn animal is on the King James coat of arms. And it is also deeply connected to the bloodlines and from their scion bloodlines that they want to present a dragon messiah, whether or not they're going to be successful or not. And why he has unicorn for the Hebrew word ren put in the Bible, which is wild boar and ox by definition, or em is the Hebrew word, not unicorn. That's inserted, I think it's 9 times in the Bible, might be 7 times, all specifically targeted in the King James Version Bible, because the end time empire is this 10-horned beast that rises up out of the sea, a hydra. And there is one horn, a single horn, a unicorn that rises up between those horns, which is the Antichrist, Daniel 7. And this is the same type of that is going on in Daniel 8 with the goat, which has the single horn, rises to be Antichrist. It's there and embedded as a marker for their own purposes by the guy who sponsored King James Version Bible, who was a royal mason from childhood. And on the book it says the mights, or at least on demonology, the book that he published, I think it's on the original King James Version as well, it says the mighty Prince James. Mighty is used to describe Nephilim in Genesis 6:4, which goes back to the word Gibberim. None of that is coincidental. Oh, I'm back. I hear you yet. I can't hear you.
Okay, I see now. Somehow I got muted, but I've seen these little small um, things like that in
We're
the
back. Yep.
KJV, but it's obvious in some of those instances. But I would probably still
Those
say
are just
even
mark.
with those,
It's a good translation.
Your camera seems like it's froze some.
Everything's
But
working at my
it's
end. Your sound's cutting in
it's
and
better
out,
now.
but
It's fixed
okay.
now.
Okay.
There's
Yeah,
just
the King James version. The King James Version Bible is as good as any of the other Bibles. I mean, they all have some issues. The thing is just beware of, and they all have translation issues. Everything back to Hebrew and Greek, and use 6 different translations to make sure I'm understanding the text as well as I can. They're just small markers that I think they put in there. They're going to use the King James Version in the end time because that's the one where they've got markers like Easter in there. They've got in there. They've got markers like Lucifer that's in there, which is the Hebrew word Hallel, and Lucifer is an Italian word inserted into the English language for a Hebrew word, and I think Hallel is the actual one of the names that Satan had before he was actually degraded, and that's in Isaiah 14:12. So they've got some of those markers in there for their own purposes as they try to envelop Christianity into the Babel polytheist religion in the end time. They're going to use that as part of their deception tactics. Direction, I mean, but most part, their changes don't really change a whole lot. They're just, as Manly Hall talks about, markers that are embedded.
Yeah, there are many of those little markers, and I read Manly Hall, 2 books of Manly B. Hall's, just to try to get, which all of the occult books that I've read have to try to get a better understanding of what these people believe. And
Yeah.
a lot of people don't even realize that Masonry is an occult secret society, that it's Luciferian.
It is, and their god is called Lucifer, or the great architect of the universe. They'll have a few other different titles. Some of them, those names is Gadrael, as well as what Enoch talks about Gadrael being in Eden. So it's either a corruption or that's another name or a title for Hallel and or Satan before he was degraded. And it's not usual for famous people of the Old Testament, like Jethro, had several different names and titles. Up to 7 is how I understand it. Not all of them are recorded in the Bible, but it's not unusual for gods or angels to have several different names bring some of their different titles.
The
At least in
time,
the view of the gods.
yeah, the times that we are living in now, we can't afford to not know these things. We as believers have got to we've got to do this research and find these things out. And we don't have to read occult writings such as I have to do that. There are many of believers who have done that for the rest of the body and written books of their own that people can read books like yours. There are many other very good books on the occult that people can read to find these things out. And this is their main topic, which is I saw something somebody had asked, and I asked this at the beginning, but they probably they must not have been watching it because they said they missed where I had asked about the what I asked you about midnight, whether it was tonight at midnight or tomorrow at midnight, or most powerful time or something like that.
Yeah, and yeah, we had talked about that, and my understanding is because use the calendar as their creation as opposed to the dusk, which would be a biblical measuring of the days and the start. So they want to do it as a counterfeit. Everything they do is a counterfeit. All Hallows Eve would begin on the same evening of the 31st, because that whole celebration of the harvest, Samhain, is 11 days long. Starts November 1st and ends November 11th. So that's the eve, All Hallows Eve. So that would be the night before, and then midnight going forward using their solar clock.
Right. So tomorrow at midnight, it would officially be the first when that festival starts.
Yep.
Or started in the 8-day festival in the ancient Celtic celebration. The Day of the Dead, you talked about that some, or the Day of the Dead is celebrated in Mexico, but there's another celebration that takes place in Spain that's pretty much the same festival, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it's all rooted in the same thing. You have in Mexico a little bit more of the native history and religions sort of overlaying on that. But yeah, it's the same thing that is done over in Spain. The similar type of thing that was done in Rome. As I said, this is a worldwide celebrated thing. But again, that makes sense because all of the pantheons, come out of the original pantheon of Enochian mysticism before the flood. And then after the flood, it starts off at Babel with Nimrod, and Nimrod stays in Mesopotamia and develops that religion and the Magi, which come out of it, and that ends up being exported over to India, as we mentioned later, as Zoroastrianism, and then becomes Hindu over there. And then Egypt is where Hermes goes, and Mizraim, he travels with them. They set up the second pillar. So between those two pillars, that's Enochian mysticism that essentially sets up all of the religions of the world, except for monotheism.
Yeah, and there is nothing monotheistic about Halloween. There are many pagan deities and nothing else. And the fact that it's a celebration of the dead, and we know that there are no spirits of dead men that are ghosts. They're all demons, and even Paul talks about how the pagans, when they sacrifice to idols, they're sacrificing to demons, being the Nephilim, and it is far from monotheistic.
Yeah, and again, I mean, that whole ritual is rooted in sacrifice and all sorts of horrible things, as we covered off earlier. It is, its history is not something one just celebrate. Or
We are getting, sorry, my last week when I was doing my program, my dog had puppies right at the end of the show, like about the last 30 minutes of the program, and so I am not in my office, and that my son's hamster's in here, and that's the reason you couldn't hear me earlier, because I keep muting the microphone because I can hear that hamster, and I've got these in, so if I can hear the hamster, I know everybody else can. But
yeah,
it'll be okay. I know we're coming up on almost the 2-hour mark. We're at an hour and 45 minutes.
Is there a chat room that might have some questions?
Yeah, was going to that's what I was going to get to now. I was going to let everybody know that if they wanted to ask a question, now would probably be the best time to get to it. The only question that I saw so far that anybody had posted in the chat was the one that we had already asked and answered. But actually there's a few more, but we'll do a couple of questions.
Sure.
Yeah, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll take the 4, and if we have maybe 1 or 2 more, if we have time. But
sure.
We've got, let's see, Dylan says he wanted to know if Obed Edom was a Nephilim, if you know.
Obed,
I,
you don't know. I've not dug into that, but I certainly it's piqued my interest to dig into that. But I don't remember anything, coming across the name that would suggest that I should dug into it. But I've been surprised in the past as you dig into some of the different names. So no, I don't have a definitive answer on that, but I think I'll be digging into that.
he also, Dylan also asked, what are the polytheist origins of the Hollow Earth or the Agartha?
Well, that is a common, I guess I would call it, understanding around the world. In one of those common, it's pyramids or El or Bigfoot. It's kind of one of those things that has been with history of humankind all the way through, and it's always interrelated. And there's different names for Argatha around the world as well. So, I mean, you have these are. I mean, if people don't know what Argatha is a legend dealing with Hollow Earth or act through portals or a gateway to the underworld that is in Hollow Earth. And so, the Buddhists would know it as okay, the Hindus as Aryavarta, and that's the Aryan name for it as well. The Chinese know it as Sitian. The Russians know it as Bilo Odai. The Kishamaya, and that's where there's Zibalba, go back and forth in between. And you also have it recorded the Epic of Gilgamesh. So there's many of these accesses to the earth around the world. Even at Mount Hermon, you have the Rock of the Gods, where you have the gateway of Hades that Jesus went to speak at, where he began to start his church through Peter and the disciples. So Argatha is a common. A lot of people think that there's a portal or a gateway where CERN is located as well. There seems to be these gateways all around the world. And so it's that sort of common legacy. You don't get caught up. I'm tripping over my tongue. I don't get caught up on any one location, as in Argatha and the access to it. It's all talking about portals and gateways to the underworld or Hades. And there could be even more ones, or maybe some of those portals are going to go into different dimensions. We don't know, because if somebody wants to, Google the word Domen, D-O, that's a portal. And you have fairy portals that they're associated with. And these are all over the world. They're like little mini Stonehenge things, just as Gilgal-Raphaim had dolmens located within it. So I look at that whole mythos of Argatha and that gateway as being the same mythos, and that there seems to be multiple places around the earth that you could access the Hollow Earth, as some people would call it. I would prefer to call it Hades. I think that's in a different Hades or Sheol.
Okay, and what about the Chinese? Is there any Chinese origins in their Nephilim, like Gog in Halloween?
They do have ritual off the demon talked about with that, along with the hero worship that comes out of Taoism. They had giants that were called the Myosi. And so again, those were the offspring of the dragon gods that produced these Myosi giants that became the royal families and the dynasties. So, and again, if we understand how religion spreads out, it went from Mesopotamia to India, which started Hinduism, where Buddhism branches out, and then that religion branches over into China, Southeast Asia, and over to Japan, which is why they have religions in that polytheist sort of extension of Zoroastrianism and Arianism. It starts to make sense. So it's hard to find a lot of information on the ancient mystical world of China because the communists destroyed everything. They burned books and things like so. There are references, but there's not a lot of detail. So my answer would be yes, but that's been sort of lost to history for the most part.
Okay, and well,
But
like you got
but through Southeast Asia, you'll get rituals like that though.
It's kind of like what you were talking about earlier, though, with in Japan anyway, like the samurai, they painted their face. I don't know if that's got anything to do with the Nephilim, but I know that dragons are really big in China, and the Japanese samurais painted their face.
Yeah, samurai is a developed martial arts that follows back a history of the Tengu that we talked about, for the bird Nephilim. And if you want to Google Tengu, or I've got documents with links to pictures on what they kind of look like. They kind of look like the Anunnaki, right? We're the offspring of the gods in a warrior class, in ruling class, combined, and then a priest class. And in the warrior class, they developed the martial arts that the samurai develop their martial arts from, and therefore when they are painting themselves up, yes, they are reflecting that history and that demonology, not necessarily as birds, but just with that sort of demonic sort of look.
And Mary, from the Next Chapter Radio Network, Mary Callie says, explain if the portals for the seasons relating to the moon and sun and the Book of Enoch, if it has anything to do with why the occultic holiday that's upon us is on these days.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know all the detail on it. I know that is deeply connected to it, because astronomy, offshoot astrology, that was developed by Enoch, son of Cain, and the solar worship is all part of that. And as we read through Enoch, I think that first Enoch is the son of Jared's book as opposed to the son of Cain. It's describing all of the avenues and the details that solar astronomical, astrological of the polytheist religion is been, so it has to be connected. Now, exactly how all of that connects in, I don't know, but it has to do with celestial procession and annual events and all sorts of things like that. So again, not something I'm a super expert on, but superficially, that's how I would understand it. I'm not sure whether we're still live or not. I don't have Jeremy. There he is.
Yeah, we're still live.
Oh, okay. Did you lose? I wasn't sure if I was lost or not. So let's.
Yeah, I was trying to look through the chat to see if there was anything on the YouTube chat. See, quite a few people telling you hello, and but that's about all the questions I've got on either one. Yep, that's pretty much all the questions, and I think that maybe, is there anywhere that people can go other than, say, like Amazon or just a regular Google search to find your book, or your podcasts that you do, things like that?
Yeah. So if you're looking for to get a hold of me or my book, the best way to do that is my website, which is the Genesis6conspiracy.com. That's Genesis 6 with the number 6conspiracy.com. And on the website, I've got a generous excerpt of all 98 chapters, so you'll get a real good feel for the book. If you want to ask me a question or get some of the documents that we've talked about, there's an email on there to contact the author. You can also click on buying, and you can get a signed copy of the book from me. And on the website, you can also click over to Amazon.com and buy it there, or BarnesandNoble.com, or over to the Kindle version on Amazon if you want a digital version of it. And it's also available on most online bookstores. If you wanted to, if you got a bookstore that you like to support, it may not be on the shelf where you are, but the book is distributed through Bookmasters, so they can order it in, and so it's readily available. People can also follow me on, under Gary Wayne on Facebook, and send me questions or ask for information on Messenger or on Timeline, and also on Twitter at Gary Wayne 63 at Gary Wayne 63.
Awesome. And like I said, this book is really slammed full of information. It really is. I probably 3 or 4 different times this week, definitely in the past 2 weeks, I have told somebody that my favorite author, or the author of my favorite book, was going to be coming on. I just have never been one big on fiction. I guess that's why it's a lot easier for me to do research type things, because I've always been real into things that have a lot of facts in them, and this book is just really slammed full of knowledge on the cults.
There's
all of
it's
it.
it's a big book, and there aren't really any filler sentences or paragraphs or chapters. It's like every sentence has more information, and it just keeps coming at you right throughout the book. It doesn't stop.
It really does. It really does. Well, Gary, I want to tell you from the bottom of my heart again, thank you so very much for coming on with me tonight. This is probably the 5th, 6th time I've heard you give close to the same information. And I'm sitting there listening to you, and I've heard a lot of these things before, and like I said, I probably forgot it more times than I realized, because I'd hear you say something, and I was like, man, just like making all these connections, and the dots just start connecting everywhere.
Well, and I like to tell people, if you don't understand, Genesis 6 and prehistory, it's really hard to understand what's going on in the Bible or in prophecy or what's going on in our world today. It's just one of those almost like Rosetta Stones that just starts to open up a whole new world for you. And once you start to recognize things, then you start seeing it everywhere.
Absolutely. That sounds like something that I say a lot, and that is, if you don't understand Genesis, you'll never understand Revelation.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, brother, again, thank you. I truly appreciate it. It was an honor. We are going to close out the program now, and I'm going to probably play maybe a song or two. I usually play at least one song to close the program out, but after that, I am going to probably get something to eat. I forgot to eat before I started. I was
you must be starving.
I really, my son, he said something right as I was getting ready to come in here. He said, "Are you going?" Because my wife's working tonight, and he said, "Are you going to make a pizza or something for supper?" So I made him, I think, a Hot Pocket and some pizza rolls. He wanted both. One wasn't good enough. So
yeah.
now I'm gonna get me something to eat, and then I'll probably see what a few of my favorite programs were about tonight that I am not able to watch when I'm doing my own. I'll definitely be watching the Omega Frequency. But again, I am so very, very honored that you came on with me. I truly am. I think a lot of you I have for several years.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. And it was enjoyable, and I'm hoping that the information that we provided tonight was helpful to the audience, and they'll understand some of these things a little more, and maybe communicate that to other people. And that's how the information gets out there. So that's what it's all about.
Absolutely. I'm sure that most of my audience is fairly familiar with you, but I know that I can think of some just off the top of my head that probably never heard the information that, even some that knew that the holiday of Halloween was pagan, definitely didn't know all the information that you shared tonight, because it was a lot indeed. But I know that they will definitely be able to use that information, to say the least. But
Terrific.
again, I am trying to get the music loaded up, and I am going to play it.